Welcome, everybody. My name is Kim Brown. I'm the host of Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Status Coup. In today, filling in for Jordan. I'm very excited to be here. Shout out to Jordan, shout out to Colin, and shout out to everybody that is checking in with us in the chat here stateside and around the world. So before we get into the show, do us a favor, give us a like, hit a thumbs up on the video, share the stream, and if you have not already, sign up to become a member to Status Coup. You need to support this channel and other independent media across the YouTube platform and really everywhere in your spaces where you encounter independent media, especially left-leaning media. You need to do your best to support that. So if you would not mind giving us some free support with a thumbs up and a like and or becoming a member to the channel, that would be deeply appreciated. Well, we have got a full show in store for you all. As you can see from the headline, really big news coming out of Kansas last night, out of that remarkable vote where Kansans overwhelmingly said that, nope, we are going to maintain constitutional access to abortion care. And I was very surprised, but perhaps I should not be so surprised with that coming out of Kansas. Coming up later on in the show, we're going to be joined with journalist and reporter Garnet Henderson, who is the host and the producer of the Access podcast, which is a podcast all about abortion. Garnet is going to help us really dissect some of the factors that went into last night's overwhelming victory. Like, it wasn't even close, guys. It was a runaway sort of vote and outcome there in Kansas as it relates to legalized access to abortion. So this is a huge deal. And this could potentially have implications for Democrats in the midterms, because if they are able to seize upon this momentum, if they can make sure that abortion, I'm giving Democrats way too much credit here. Let me credit the activists and the organizers on the ground for that victory. I will not give Democrats the credit on this, but Democrats need to Democrat and go ahead and take credit for other people's work so they can potentially use this momentum to maintain power in the midterms. Perhaps it's not going to be a red wave after all in November, guys. So we're going to discuss that. Also coming up a little bit later on the show, we're going to be joined with activist and organizer Ricci Sergienko from the People's City Council. As you guys have been following Jordan's reporting, as he has been on the road, you understand that housing insecurity is a huge problem for working people and poor people in this country. And a lot of governments, cities, states, them are doing big steps to try to make sure that homeless people, the unhoused, and basically poor folks are going to be criminalized for not being able to afford ungodly housing costs as it stands right here in the US, where more people are paying north of 40% of their monthly budget to keep a roof over their heads. And cities and states across the country are criminalizing people who have had to go to the streets in order to survive. So Richard Sergienko is going to join us a little bit later to talk about repealing 41.18. The Los Angeles City Council is attempting to further criminalize houselessness. And there is a chance to try to potentially stop that additional criminalization from going forward. But first, I want us to check in with Jordan. Jordan was down in Philadelphia last night. He has been standing with housing advocates at this encampment in Philadelphia that is there trying to prevent the eviction of low-income residents. Let's take a look at that.
We are at the UC Townhomes, where I was at about a week and a half ago. Right behind me is a bunch of tents, which sprung up a couple weeks ago because the residents here, mostly low income, many of whom have lived here for decades, are being forced out, threatened with eviction by September because the landlord wants to sell the property that they've lived in for years to a real estate developer. So the residents here who are fighting this eviction invited community members to come out and help them stop this eviction. So the tents here, which have been here for a few weeks, are community members who are supporting the residents and trying to fight this economic terrorism. Forget the word gentrification. The property owner hasn't responded. The city politicians haven't responded. So they're just basically ignoring a major protest in the city.
And I would like to know again, why? I know I said why before and everything, but why? Why won't they respond? Why don't they want to speak to us? I don't understand that. I mean, I never seen my landlord. That sounds weird. I never seen him.
They're putting up luxury stature, like luxury housing, luxury apartments, condos, buildings that cater to people with a lot of money, and things of that nature. Like, you look around us, they're building all types of centers that cater to people with money. Meanwhile, the residents here are being pushed out and flushed out.
What used to be generally understood as middle class pit against actual buying power, that has diminished. And so many of these kids, if not their own families, at least know some persons who are not that far removed from our situation. You know what I mean? So, and that's probably a part of the reason why they're here as well, because they see the writing on the wall for their own communities if inflation and all the other things that accompany economic domination goes unchecked.
The residents' demands: stop the demolition, give us more time, make immediate repairs, provide just compensation. It's really outrageous, and that's why I call this economic terrorism. I don't call it that for a punchline. It's pretty terrorizing if you don't know where you and your kids are going to be in a month.
And this is something that we will not stand for. Like, you cannot shut the voices of the people down. The voices of the people will be heard whether they like it or not, or whoever don't like it. Our voices will be heard. The voices of the people will be heard. Residents, community members that have stood up to support, and anybody else who stands up to support. Our voices will be heard.
Just remarkable work there from Jordan. And just looking at those pictures coming out of Philadelphia, y'all, we could be talking about Washington, D.C. We could easily be talking about San Francisco. We could be talking about New York City. But clearly here we're talking about Philadelphia. And I like the fact that Jordan called it economic terrorism. And let me add on to that. This is racial violence, okay? Gentrification is racial violence when you are forcefully displacing people from their homes, generational or otherwise. We know a lot of people in towns like Philadelphia, in DC, in New York, people who have lived in these cities and in these neighborhoods for multi-generations are now being forced out as they see their property values rise, taxes are rising, water bills are rising. And these are some of the insidious tactics that the landlord class, enabled by the political class, use in order to force Black and brown people from where they are, and they really don't care where they go after that. And that is absolutely tragic. And it's I'm very glad that Jordan is covering that. And I want to give big up to all the housing advocates there across the country, y'all, because the ways in which we can prevent, the ways in which we can help to stop our neighbors from being forced out of their homes is exactly what we just saw out of Philadelphia. It takes organizing. It takes a united stand, a united front, because when the political power understands that once the people tap into that people power, it is over. It is over for y'all. And so I am of the firm belief, as I'm being also instructed by my Black Power media comrades, that organizing here is the key. And the thing is, as we are seeing our politicians, particularly in neoliberal controlled cities, blue cities like Philadelphia, like Baltimore, like DC, like San Francisco, like Chicago, these elected officials are here to represent the wealthy, and that's it. They're here to represent the property owners, and that's it. They don't give a flying FUCK about the residents, certainly about low income residents. And the problem is, I'm not sure that you can vote your way out of that, okay? Because who is on the ballot, for example, in Philadelphia? It's likely Democrat versus Democrat, right? You know, in cities that have firm Democratic strongholds, usually Republican candidates, not that they should, but you know, the Republican candidates don't stand a chance. So usually it's a one-trick pony in a lot of these democratically controlled, used to be majority Black cities. So what's the alternative here, guys? We gonna keep voting blue no matter who? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's incumbent upon the people to not only continue to organize in your communities, but to put increasingly pressure, political pressure on these candidates, on these elected officials. And I want to say run people to the left of them, if that is at all possible. But it's hard for them folks to raise money. So when you see candidates, preferably third-party candidates, because I don't even know if we could even trust progressive Democrats anymore, because they will get into office and immediately forget all the progressive shit that they talked about on the campaign trail. Like, what you mean? Eviction forgiveness? I don't even remember saying anything like that, person. I don't remember saying anything like that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how a lot of this shakes out. And I'm not sure if Richie's going to be able to join us at this moment, but what I am going to do is get everybody up to speed on what has been happening out in Los Angeles, because even though it's in LA, keep in mind that a lot of anti-camping legislation has been passed in cities and states across this country. We've seen it passed in Tennessee, where it is illegal, punishable by prison time for people to camp outside. And obviously they're not talking about people who, you know, are out there camping for pleasure. They're talking about people who are being forced to sleep outside because of poverty. In New York City, we saw Mayor Eric Adams utilize NYPD to forcibly clear encampments where residents, unhoused residents, were basically terrorized by police. And this is a scenario that we see continued play out across the country, in Minneapolis and out in Los Angeles. Again, Democratic stronghold. How's neoliberalism working for everybody? Terrible. Terrible, especially if you were a low-income person or poor person or unhoused person. So what's been happening out in LA? The Los Angeles City Council passed an ordinance 41.18, which further criminalizes sleeping outside, laying outside, being on the sidewalk, obstructing the public way. But now they are trying to pass an amendment that would further expand that out so that there could be no unhoused people within a certain amount of feet from schools or from daycares. Now, a lot of people might hear that and be like, oh, well, the kids shouldn't be seeing homeless people, first of all. First of all, it does not say much about our society if we are simply just trying to keep poor people out of public view. That does nothing to solve the problem. And first of all, children need to understand about inequality. And I think viewing unhoused people on the streets, even in proximity to them, is not something that will damage children, in my humble, unparented, child-free opinion. But the activists and the organizers in Los Angeles are not going for the things. They are not going for that at all. So yesterday morning, the Los Angeles City Council met in an attempt to try to pass this amendment to 41.18, but they were met by stiff resistance. So the montage of clips that we're about to see come from the People City Council and Services Not Sweeps LA. And what you're going to see is activists coming into the city council space, rowdy, but rowdy in the best way possible. Good rowdy, good trouble, right? They came in there on some good trouble, right? And you're going to see the city council melt. They're going to melt down because they do not like all the drama. They do not like all the smoke right there in their face. They have a huge problem with that. And then you're going to see Los Angeles Police Department be summoned in order to force the activists out of the chamber. And then we're going to hear some comments from some activists in response to them getting put out of the chamber, but obviously in direct response to this horrible ordinance. Shame on the Los Angeles City Council for trying to further criminalize being poor and being unhoused. Let's take a look at these clips.
So to everybody who's shouting, we will clear the room if you continue. So, I mean, really? Wow. So we're going to clear the room. If you don't be quiet, we will clear the room and you'll all be out. So, to repeat, we will clear the room if you don't let the council members speak.
Back up! 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 Fuck you! Back up! 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 Get the fuck out of here! Fuck you! Back the fuck up!
Those selected individuals ran away from what democracy truly looks like. They've shut it down, they've walked out, but they have not silenced our voices. Let us say what is on the table today. When we say repeal 4118, when we say abolish, what we're really saying is repeal Jim Crow. Repeal redlining. Repeal Okie Towns. Repeal sundown laws. Repeal black codes. Repeal redlining again. Repeal Operation Mojados. Because what they are attempting to do is to discard all of Angelinos who make this city.
Hit us against them when we know that it's a racist law because almost 40% of the people living outside are black. And then tons of them are disabled like me. So what is this law doing? It's racist and it's disablist. And that's the truth. And anybody who votes for it is voting for a racist law. That's it. And they caused the shit. So they need to fix it and fix it right. And that means without police.
Hell yeah. Shout out to Black and Brown and the Radical Whites. And speaking of Radical Whites, we have one on the line right now. We are joined today with my friend, good buddy, Ricci Sergienko from the People's City Council. Ricci, thank you so much for making time to join me today on Status Coup News.
Hi, Kim. As always, love you so much. You're great. This is Nicole, co-founder of People's City Council as well. We're just kicking it over at Nicole's. So Nicole was there yesterday as well. So it was well, one, yeah, like you pointed out, it was rowdy and all that, but also like people's lives are at risk because of what city council does. So that's why everyone is actually just upset about, like 5
Absolutely.
Unhoused people die every day.
And that's something I definitely want you to contextualize for everybody, because, this is not simply about people who want to perhaps, go sleep on Venice Beach or, go back to Echo Lake Park. I mean, this is literally a life or death issue. And the Los Angeles City Council seems completely, well, at least, 11-3, apathetic about the plight of nearly 40,000 unhoused Los Angelinos on the street. So talk to me about the significance of showing up yesterday at the LA City Council meeting to protest this amendment to 4118. How does this amendment already make a bad law already worse?
Well, Richie's looking at me because I'm a mom of a 14-year-old. I'm born and raised in LA, LAUSD mom here, and I was really upset to see this come about and how a lot of city council members were just almost using and weaponizing children for this amendment, and it erases all of the unhoused families that we have here in LA. If we look at the stats for LAUSD, 80% of our children live at or below poverty level, and many of them are living in cars close to the schools that they go to. So that is why I feel very passionate about this, because I feel like they're erasing a lot of the children and families here in LA. But I'll hand it over to Ricci too.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's important to show up because they are actually acting in an unpopular way. People don't want elected officials, like Angelenos do not want elected officials to just sweep and displace unhoused people. People in Los Angeles want people to get housing, but the reality is that we don't have enough housing, or we don't have enough placements for unhoused people, right? I think we can only fill like 40% of the total unhoused population, and that's in both permanent and temporary housing. And we don't view temporary housing as a real solution. So it's just like really frustrating, and they double down on the same tactics. But it's okay. They can continue to operate like that, and they will continue to grow unpopular, and they will continue to perpetuate violence against people. But they will continue to grow unpopular, and will continue to grow because poor and working class people understand what's happening in front of them.
So talk to me about the ways, I guess the non-law enforcement ways in which the LA City Council in Los Angeles is trying to deal with the issue of many, many thousands of unhoused people. Because, I mean, y'all, this is not an issue of money. California got the fucking money. They got plenty of money. And in fact, LA just passed over an $11 billion budget earlier this year, where somehow the LAPD got a raise in their budget. How did that correlate into the amount of money that the city is willing to spend to try to find housing and permanent shelter for unhoused residents?
So we spend about a third of the total police budget and everything. This includes like the pensions and the retirements. So over a third of that budget goes to LAPD. And they get a total like $3.2 billion. And then I think homelessness and housing budgets get a combined like near $1 billion. So we spend $2 billion more on LAPD, and it makes sense why city council passes laws like 4118, right? They have to justify why they give LAPD $3.2 billion. They have to justify why they give a raise to LAPD after killings went up 160% last year, after they killed 14-year-old Valentina in a dressing room a few days from Christmas. Like, think about all the shit that LAPD did last year. They blew up a fucking South Central neighborhood, and then they they raided Echo Park in the middle of the night, which Mitchell Farrell spent $2 million on 2 nights, and they got a raise. And so the elected officials aren't they're not going to solve homelessness. That's not in their interest. They're not acting like that's their plan.
It's pretty ridiculous. I mean, ridiculous actually doesn't even encapsulate it in the most appropriate way, because really it's cruel. I mean, this is cruel and inhumane and just abhorrent behavior from any elected officials, let's be clear. But, there was this idea, this notion that somehow Democrats are somehow softer, more compassionate, a little bit more understanding, and are more likely to want to fund social services and outreach programs more so than Republicans. But I mean, Nicole, Nicole, I mean, I'm looking at LA. I do not see compassionate coming out of that Los Angeles City Council. I mean, for those who are still maybe holding on to the fallen notion that Democrats somehow do it better, and by the way, it is always fuck Republicans just off GP, but how are poor and low income and Black and brown residents faring in democratically controlled Los Angeles?
Not well. It was infuriating yesterday. We were essentially all kicked out at some point, or at least most of us, while they essentially just held recess, and they came back about an hour later. We weren't able to re-enter. And the things that just came out of Nuri Martinez's mouth, she's supposed to be our city council president, and it was just awful. She made comments about how we didn't look poor enough. We do not represent the people, that we were just there to disrupt them from doing any work for the people, even though they didn't want to listen to us giving public comment, or even some of the unhoused residents that were there. There were unhoused students that were there trying to give comment. So she is just so detached, and she loves to call herself the champion for the working poor. And that is just so far from the truth.
I saw Nuri Martinez, and I was not previously all that familiar with her. She is a council member there in Los Angeles.
Council
and it
president.
Was big. Oh, council president, my bad. And she was giving us big, what about the children energy?
Yes.
And it's like, lady, simmer down, simmer down. And I guess, she doesn't encounter too many white unhoused people. So she must have thought y'all was some hired actors or something along those lines. But this fight is not over. Ricci and Nicole, because and you guys, I need y'all to kind of bring this a little bit into clarity for me. If we could get that KPCC tweet up, because so the vote yesterday went down 11-3, but from what, and please, make it clear if I'm retelling it incorrectly, but because of this amendment that was proposed, it has to be approved unanimously or not at all. So there is going to be a third vote coming up regarding 41.18. So do I have that right? And what can people do? What is the direct action that you guys are going to continue to move forward in order to make sure that city council votes on this the correct way?
Yeah, you're right. So it's going to have another reading, I believe August 9th is the date that they set. So we want to turn out, and I think that's something that they're hoping for, that the more it gets pushed, another date, that we're going to lose that steam, and that we're not going to show up the way that we keep on showing up in numbers. So I definitely want people to keep on showing up, flood the public comment, but also just share information. They keep on crying about the children, but, yesterday I, yelled out loud, well, what about the homeless children? Because everyone seems to be erasing them and forgetting that they're here. And we need to make sure that their voices are being heard. And I just think that we need to keep on showing up and letting them know that we're not going to give up just because they keep on changing the dates on us.
Oh, go ahead, honey.
Oh, I was just gonna add, show up. That's what we want to do, but also, you need to make these people's lives uncomfortable. If you see them out in public, you need to call their asses out. And sometimes all you have to do is just go to the Services Not Sweeps toolkit, or the social media, or People City Council. We try to keep people well informed, and so, or just keep people knowing their rights, right? We just try to see what is happening, or what elected officials are passing, and share that information. And if Black and brown folks in Los Angeles, poor and working class folks already understand what's happening. They can see, we can all see what's happening in Los Angeles, right? And if you know who your enemies are, and our enemies right now are capital and elected officials, then, you know, if our lives are uncomfortable, then they should be fucking uncomfortable too.
Ricci, you give the best fuck the polices. I swear to God, every time you go viral for telling the police that they ain't shit, I shed a tear right here. Like it touches me deep in my heart. I truly love to see it. Gang, I want you guys to please go follow People City Council on Twitter and on social media. They are with the shits. That's the best way I can describe it. Absolutely with the shits, and out here again as amazing examples of radical whites. This is the kind of shit white people need to be on. You need to be more like Ricci. You need to be more like Nicole. So please follow them on social media and put your whiteness to good use out here. Ricci and Nicole, thank you both so much for your work, for your commitment, for your dedication, for your fearlessness. And I appreciate you guys making time to join me today on Status Coup.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim. Bye.
Thanks, guys. All right, Status Coolers, do me a favor. If you have not already liked the video, give it the like, give it the share, and subscribe to the channel. And also try to support the channel financially if you can. Sign up to become a monthly supporting member here on YouTube at Status Coup. So I'm very, again, you have to understand, y'all, we working class, poor, and non-white and non-hetero, like everybody, not a white man, is under attack. And if you're a white man with sympathies for any of those groups, you are a traitor. You are an official race traitor, and they will treat you as such. So always keep that in mind. But I call the radical whites who support Burn It Down with Kim Brown the John Brown Brigade. And listen, we need more John Browns. We need less Joe Bidens. we need fewer Bill Clintons. We need more Ricci Sergienkos out here. So white folks, take your cues, take your marching orders, because you know they shoot black people out here. So do that shit, show up at the city council chamber and cause some havoc. So these elected officials understand, like Ricci said, if our lives are not comfortable, if our lives are not comfortable, then your lives are not going to be comfortable either. So speaking of uncomfortable, if you are a uterus bearing person or a pregnant person or a person who was able to become pregnant, surely these recent decision, it's even repugnant to even think about it or to even say it out loud, that abortion access is not uniform throughout the United States right now. It is a very scary time to be a pregnant person, to be a potentially pregnant person, and especially if you live in a state that is abortion restrictive. Well, last night, August the 2nd, in Kansas, it was primary night, and there was on the ballot whether or not access to abortion would remain legal and part of the Constitution of Kansas. So basically, in the state of Kansas, abortion was constitutionally protected. And thank goodness it still is. It was an overwhelming vote last night out of Kansas. Even some reports indicating that it was a historic turnout, which to me says a lot. It says a lot. To get some more clarity and some analysis of what this Kansas vote could possibly mean, what it means today, and what it will mean going forward, we are joined with Garnet Henderson, who is the host and the producer of Access Podcast. Access is a podcast about abortion. Garnet is a journalist and a reporter, and I'm very glad that she's able to join me today. Garnet, how are you? Thank you so much for making time.
Hey, Kim, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well today. You know, we had some rare good news last night.
It's pretty remarkable. When I saw the percentages, 59% voting to support maintaining access to abortion, constitutionally protected access to abortion in Kansas, versus 47% who wanted to see abortion banned altogether, which was pretty insane. Before we get deeply into our conversation, Garnet, I actually want us to take a look at this package from More Perfect Union. Shout out to More Perfect Union. They do outstanding work out here. And this is a clip from a longer piece that they had posted on Twitter, but it focuses on what the ground game looked like in trying to make sure that Kansas voters were aware that this measure was on the ballot, and that it was integral that they turn out and show up and vote. So let's take a look at this package really quickly from More Perfect Union.
My is Yasmin, and I am a volunteer for Kansans for Constitutional Freedom. Today we are going to go canvassing to make sure that all voters are informed about the August 2nd Amendment that could potentially take away our right to abortion. Whether you're a rape victim or an incest survivor, or even if you want a baby and you have complications in that pregnancy, like even those kinds of abortions will be stripped away. So we want to make sure just everybody has that autonomy over their body. It's already within the Kansas Constitution.
Right now, the Kansas Constitution in the Bill of Rights protects the right to abortion under a broader protection of bodily autonomy.
What this constitutional amendment will do is gut the Kansas constitutional mandate that allows for and affirms bodily autonomy for anyone, and more specifically, women, pregnant women.
Y'all want to hear a quick story?
Yeah.
My mother was in Seattle, Washington. She moved down here. She went on a date with a dude. I was supposed to have an older brother. But you know what? I don't have this other brother today because she was date raped. She didn't want that kid. I mean, that's a woman's rights.
I'm also a rape survivor, so I know what it's like to not have a choice. And so to know that if abortion is taken away, that those people and those people that are abused after me, that they won't have a choice is terrifying.
Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, at least 8 states have banned abortions. Kansas is now an island of abortion access. An abortion ban in Kansas would create a healthcare crisis across the region.
Post Roe v. Wade map without Kansas is absolutely terrifying. Kansans will have to travel, Missourians will have to travel, Oklahomans will have to travel, people that live in Arkansas will have to travel. There's nowhere else to go.
Whew, I just got the chills, Garnet, by looking at that map that was featured in the piece and seeing if Kansas were to lose access to abortion, what that would mean regionally for people seeking abortion services for literally 1,000 miles. So talk to us, number one, about what was on the line last night, because it seems as though the GOP legislature there was really trying to, for lack of a better phrase, go balls to the wall with it and make sure that no abortions could be you could not access an abortion under any circumstances had this measure not gone the way that we wanted it to.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you played that clip, because really all credit for this victory goes to the organizers who worked so incredibly hard on the ground to make sure people understood what was at stake here, because the anti-abortion campaign was actually lying to people and telling them to vote the wrong way in order to protect abortion rights. So there was a lot of deception going on, and you're absolutely right. This would have been an extreme change, an alteration to the state's constitution, which is really consequential, because now that there's no federal right to an abortion because of the Supreme Court decision, the only way to challenge abortion bans is in state courts. So all of a sudden, what is in state constitutions is becoming extremely important. And as we saw in that clip, Kansas is really kind of an island at the moment, surrounded by states that either have already banned abortion or are expected to do so imminently. And it's one of the few places right now that people from the Southeast and Midwest can travel to in order to get the abortions that they need.
You know, the way that the vote broke down was interesting. Let's call it interesting. Let's take a look at that tweet, I believe, from Brian Lowry from the Kansas City Star. And, you know, they noted something interesting. So this is a map of the state of Kansas. And the journalist says, you know, one thing that is very striking about the abortion vote map from last night, it's not just urban and suburban counties like Wyandotte County, Johnson County, and Sedgwick. Several rural GOP-leaning counties like Osage, Lyon, and Franklin also voted to make sure that abortion access remained constitutional. Garnet, I mean, what do you make of that? For one, I have to say this, you know, we know Kansas, obviously there are Latino and Black residents, but it is an overwhelmingly white state, right? And so I took this as white women came out and said, nope, nope. And I'm glad the white women did that. But I see this very much, obviously, I know how I generally assume the way that Black people and people of color would vote on such an issue. But I think the way the white women voted here is notable.
I agree. And I also think it's just more evidence of the fact that legal abortion is really popular. A majority of voters believe that abortion should be legal in at least some circumstances, if not all. And that includes Republican voters. And so that's what we're seeing here, because as you pointed out, this was a really extreme provision that would have limited all access to abortion. And there are people who believe that abortion may be wrong in some circumstances, but not in others. And so what's important, I think, is that we see here that people recognized that if you think people should be able to access abortion in at least some circumstances, then abortion cannot be illegal. And I think another really important thing to note is that Kansas has seen some of the most extreme anti-abortion terrorism of any state in the entire country. So Wichita, Kansas was the location of this country's largest anti-abortion demonstration, led by an organization called Operation Rescue in the summer of 1991. They called it the Summer of Mercy. And they brought thousands of activists who descended on Wichita and essentially shut the city down for several weeks and succeeded in their goal of forcing abortion clinics to stop operating temporarily. And the main target of that harassment was Dr. George Tiller, who was then gunned down in his church in 2009 after surviving multiple previous assassination attempts. And that very church was a polling place yesterday. So I think it also goes to show that violence also makes the anti-abortion movement unpopular. Lots of people might identify with the values that the anti-abortion movement presents. They say it's about God and the value of every human life. But when they see the lengths that anti-abortion activists are willing to go to ensure that abortion is not accessible, which include violence and murder, then they no longer want to be associated with that movement.
So when we look at the implication of this vote, the outcome of this vote last night in Kansas, and there's so many of these squirrely laws, and I hate to even that's reductionist. Let me not even say squirrely, because they're not squirrely. They're intentional. They're punitive. They're harmful, and they punish women. They punish pregnant people. And some of these laws are still enshrined in state constitutions. Is there, from your experience and your reporting and your research, is there, or are there other states in which a vote like this could come up, where it could be put to the people for them to decide whether or not abortion access remains legal in where they live?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are several states where we're not going to have abortion referendums on the ballot, but abortion will essentially be on the ballot when it comes to what party is in control of the state's legislature, especially in states like Michigan, for example, where abortion is not banned now, but it certainly could be banned depending on how things go in upcoming elections. And then Kansas, also, there was this important victory last night. It's also worth noting that Kansas currently has a Democratic governor. And so whether or not she is able to hold on to that seat will also have a big effect on what kinds of abortion restrictions the Kansas state legislature might still try, even though they've lost this important ballot referendum. Because as we know, state legislatures had no problem passing abortion restrictions when they were considered unconstitutional. So I have no doubt that Republicans in Kansas might still try it, depending on how things go for them when it comes to the general election. And I think it's also important to note that in a lot of states right now, we have pre-Roe abortion bans in effect. And in many cases, those laws were passed before women gained the right to vote in the late 1800s. And so I do think we could see voters in those states maybe, hopefully, mobilize to try and repeal some of those pre-Roe bans in the few states where there aren't also more recent abortion bans that are kind of waiting in the wings to take effect.
Garnet, in your opinion, what does this victory last night in Kansas send to anti-choice conservatives? What message does this send to anti-choice conservatives? Because, a number of folks are theorizing that, hey, this was good that Kansas did this, but you know what? That just means that Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley are going to go to Congress to try to get a federal ban on abortion enacted. And I know people that live in blue states they seem to think that this is unfathomable or something that is not possible. How could that be possible? Not in New York, not in New Jersey, not in Maryland. They could never outlaw abortion there. But that doesn't mean that these congressional Republicans certainly won't try to do exactly that. How likely of a scenario is that, in your opinion?
Oh, look, I think Republicans are going to try for a federal abortion ban, whether or not they're able to get it. And I think the alarming thing about that is that we know that the Supreme Court will back them up on that. Because last night's victory in Kansas shows, as I said, that legal abortion is popular. Republicans have been claiming that voters oppose access to legal abortion for decades now, and that's never been true. And what happened last night in Kansas proves that. But we know that Republicans don't really care what voters think because a lot of their positions are extremely unpopular, but they're able to stay in power because of gerrymandering and other oppressive systems. So I think what's really concerning is that even though it is extremely unpopular, Republicans will try, and they probably will keep trying for a federal abortion ban. And the really alarming thing is that if that does pass and we end up in a situation where there's a Republican in the White House who will sign it, people can try to challenge it, but we know that the Supreme Court would in all likelihood uphold it, unless I suppose they were swayed by public pressure, which certainly has happened with the Supreme Court before. I mean, that's how we got Roe versus Wade in the first place. That really was about public pressure on the court. But now the truth is, I don't think that these justices really care what the public thinks at all.
Looking at this from an electoral standpoint, the midterms are just a few short months away, and Joe Biden, along with other powerful Democrats, have reminded us, finger wagged us, if you will, that Roe is on the ballot, that abortion access is on the ballot, and they've used this as a carrot or a method to entice voters to the polls for a long time now. Like the Democrats have been telling us that abortion access is on the ballot. And it's deeply ironic that under a Democratic president that the Supreme Court would disallow abortion in abortion restrictive states while Joe Biden sits in the White House. But, from your reporting and from your experience and in your opinion, Garnet, is this going to be enough to galvanize voters? And I can't even just say specifically Democratic voters, because my guess is it was not simply Democrats that turned out last night in Kansas. I'm guessing it was as people across, from differing political stripes, because this is a vested issue for all pregnant people, regardless of what your political affiliation is. Do you see this galvanizing voters to the polls to make sure that candidates who support abortion access will be able to maintain that blue majority in Congress?
Well, I think one really important point also from Kansas last night is there were many more votes on this question of the abortion referendum than there actually were for the candidates in the primary elections. So in other words, lots of people turned out just to vote on that one question related to abortion and did not vote for a single candidate. Could be because they were registered independent because of the way the primary system works in Kansas, or it could be that they just showed up to fill out that one oval on their ballot and none of the others. And I think that's a really important lesson for Democrats. People care. They want abortion to remain legal. But if Democrats want the votes of those people, they have to show that they're going to do something about it. And so far, the federal government's response has been incredibly weak to the overturn of Roe versus Wade. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are both still mostly refusing to even say the word abortion. And Joe Biden has taken a couple of steps with recent executive orders, mostly related to making sure abortion remains accessible in states where it's now banned in emergency situations. And today he also announced that he is going to issue an executive order to protect people who need to travel for abortion care. So I think at a very minimum, what voters need to see is that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party writ large are serious about that. They're going to take those steps that they're promising. They're going to do absolutely everything in the federal government's power, and they haven't even come close to doing that. That they need to show people that they're going to use that power of the federal government to protect abortion access. Otherwise, why should people vote for the Democratic Party? They can tell us they need more senators, but I'm not even convinced that if they had the votes, they would do anything right now. So they need to show that seriousness and that intention if they want people to vote for them in November.
And I hate that they have us in this quandary, right? Because it is lesser of the two evils. Who are you going to choose? And, you know, the Democrats are feckless and impotent and flaccid and all these things. But, you know, Republicans are outright misogynist, right? They hate women. they can't stand for women to have any sort of autonomy or say over their bodies, let alone even if they have the ability to get access to birth control, which perhaps we'll have you on another time to have that conversation because that is a shit show. But I too remain unconvinced about what the Democrats are prepared to do. Are they going to do all that they can to ensure abortion access for all? But anyway, Garnet, I deeply appreciate you making some time to join me today on very short notice. So thank you so much for that. Everybody watching right now on Status Coup, please go subscribe to Garnet's podcast. It's called Access, a podcast all about abortion. She is an amazing journalist. She does fantastic interviews and gives some really deep dives into a lot of the different facets of reproductive justice that you definitely need to know about, and send it to your congressperson. And so they too can be informed. Garnet, thank you. Thank you so much. You are fantastic. And I appreciate your work and everything that you do.
Thanks so much for having me, Kim.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Garnet. All right, gang, that is that. Let us see. Where are we? We have 5 minutes left. So actually, since I'm on somebody else's thing, I'm going to cut this off early. I'm going to see you guys later. But do me a favor. If you have not already liked the video, please like the video and become a member of Status Coup News. You need to support all independent media, especially independent left media, where you guys see that left voices are under attack, are targeted for censorship. And I want you please to subscribe to my channel, Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube. Burn It Down with Kim Brown. Thank you all so much who has already subscribed. And please go subscribe also to Black Power Media. If you are looking for a radical political education about Black liberation, Black Power Media is the place for you to be. So thank you all so much. Deeply appreciative to Jordan and to Colin for allowing me to come in and hang out with y'all cool kids over here at Status Coup. So maybe we will hang out again in the future. But in the interim, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you guys take care, be safe. Don't forget, COVID is out here jumping on people. Monkeypox is out here jumping on people. I need y'all to pretend as though we are dealing with some serious virality in the air and handle yourselves accordingly, okay? Thank you all so much. We'll check you again on Status Coup News.